Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to our today's artist talk, which will focus on the topics reclaiming the gaze and questioning the representation of the female body in photography. The conversation will be held in English and is broadcasted live on the gallery's Instagram account. In addition, the artist talk will be made available as a video clip which will be on view on the gallery's website by the end of June. I'm very happy to welcome Brigitte Lustenberger. Born in Zurich, Switzerland, Brigitte studied at Zurich University and received her Master in Social and Photo History in 1996. She moved to New York and received her MFA in Fine Art, Photography and Related Media at the Parsons The New School of Design in 2007. The main issues in her works lie in her interest in the study of the gaze, the interplay between absence and presence in a photographic image, and the fact that the reading of a photograph is most often triggered by a collective memory. She explores the media itself and its close connection to themes like decay, memory, death, and transitoriness. Then I would like to introduce you to Bettina Gockel, who studied art history, theater studies, modern German literature, and archaeology in Munich and Hamburg. Since 2008, Bettina Gockel has been professor and chair of history of fine arts at the History Institute of the University of Zurich. She is the director of the Center for Studies in the Theory and History of Photography at the Institute of Art History. Last but not least, I would like to introduce you to Danaé Panchaud, who is a museologist, curator and lecturer specializing in photography. Danaé is based in Switzerland and she is currently the director and curator of Photoforum Pasquart in Biel and will become the new director of the Centre de la Photographie in Genève. Danaé will guide us through the conversation and I would now like to give her the floor. Please, Danaé.
Thank you so much. Thank you for organizing this. I'm really happy to be with you today. And I was thinking on who is talking today and thinking how important it is to have people here on this table who approach these themes with very different tools coming from the practice of photography, the theory, history of art. And I think we'll have a very exciting conversation today. I would like to start with you and also with how these themes deployed are important in your work. And maybe if you can... sorry, the word is escaping me. But maybe if you can explain us how these themes developed in your practice over the years.
I have a few topics that are very important in my work, and one is the gaze, like the topic suggests, like the title suggests. And I would like to show you a little bit how the gaze in my work became a tool I started to work with within the last couple of years, the last maybe 10, 15 years. I've always been very intrigued by the gaze, especially when I looked at or watched films, a lot of whodunit, crime films, thrillers, because the cinema has a way of directing our gaze so the tension gets up. And I kind of tried to take these tools from the cinema into my work and try to work with these tools and address the gaze. And I maybe show you, to start, just some images. I don't know, do you see it with the reflection? I started out with very narrative work where I placed women in the picture, and all these pictures are like memories of ourselves. Most of the pictures we think we've seen before. This is another important issue in my works. But here you can see that I try to play with the gaze. We have like the gaze of the woman inside the picture. We don't really see what she's looking at because she kind of looks behind the wall, but we can anticipate the gaze. And then we have the gaze of the camera that becomes our gaze, the gaze of the viewer. And the camera is set, so I kind of take up the gaze of the viewer. And we kind of are becoming the viewer. And the interplay of these gazes for me is very interesting because I really want to ask myself, who am I looking at and who is looking at me? And this, how shall I say, the gaze has always been in photography a male gaze when we talk about women in photography. A lot of, especially nude women have been photographed almost exclusively by men. And so I'm kind of like questioning this gaze with these images and try with the next image. It's kind of like a step further. It's like a little story. We look again at a woman, and here the woman starts to look back. Just very, very gently in the corner of her eyes, she kind of realizes there is someone who watches me, whereas here she isn't aware of the watcher yet. We just watch her in her kind of like tense atmosphere. And here she kind of like realizes that she's been watched. And then the next series I was working on goes a step further. And I don't know if you can see, we have these three women on the street. And here one of the women really looks back at the viewer, at us, who look at the image. We're kind of interrupting a scene. And with these works, with these older works, I really try to kind of like challenge our gaze. So what do we do when we look at an image? Who is looking back at me? And try to kind of like deal with the gaze in photography.
And then you're saying something, I think what we saw in the first image is that you are adopting the male gaze, the gaze of the viewer, and then by extension you are placing us in that position that we may not have chosen, that by seeing this image we have this role that is being imposed on us. I think that was the first way you dealt with the topic. And if we move a little bit further to now, you're saying something very important, I think, about this series and the work that is exhibited here, which is that you are photographing yourself because you cannot objectify yourself.
Exactly. I made a step further and in the end kind of like abandoned my models and took myself as a model. And one of the reasons was definitely that I cannot objectify myself. Because that was one of the criticism about the male gaze, that the male is always the subject and the female is always the object. And the gaze or the fantasy or the image the male has is kind of imposed on the woman in the picture and on the female viewer as well. So when I take myself as the model, I kind of like can't objectify myself. I mean, I'm still me. And I see myself in the camera on the same level. And that was probably the most important reason that I take the pictures of myself. But also that I don't have to ask anybody. I'm always available. I know exactly what I want. it makes work for me much more easier than when I work with an assistant and the model. That's another reason. That has nothing to do with the gaze, but yeah.
And I find it very interesting how you are referring to the gaze as a tool in your work. It could be an issue, it could be a theme, but you use this as a tool. And I think this brings also us to the idea that the gaze is also a social construction. It's not something that just exists by itself. And here I think we could have some insights from Bettina on this idea also of the gaze, gender as constructs.
Maybe before I answer your question, I could start with two general impressions I have about the works that are exhibited here. Mm-hmm. And the audience can't see the more classical nude photographs over there, but they get an impression by this work. And I think all the works here, also the pictures with the flowers, have a very subjective impression. And I think that fits your what you said about you're not able to objectify yourself. And I think this subjectivity that is inside or is present allows the viewer to also to reflect one's own subjectivity, memories, contemporary experiences. So the works are open to that. And I think that's very important, especially in our time, because we really try to get rid of stereotypes. We want to move on to subjective diversity. And that is where I see the importance of each single work here. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, I see very classical genres like the nude, still lifes. And photography is, as Wolfgang Kempf once stated, is really bound in these classical categories and genres. And that is where the artist here is connected to photo and art history. And I would like to give one example about the photographs that show fragmented bodies. And you said very, very correctly that almost always it was the female model depicted, photographed by the male gaze. And one thing that comes immediately to mind is how Stieglitz photographed Georgia O'Keeffe's breasts and hands. And but that fragmentation back then was about newness, about a radical new photography, and his aim was really to install photography as art. So he wanted to make avant-garde art. Whereas here, although it's this, you're kind of integrated in this history of art photography, and at the same time there is this very original, subjective aspect and gaze, actually. And the more theoretical framework about gaze is certainly connected to the history of feminism since the 1970s. And nowadays, when you look in recent research literature, there's much more writing about the female gaze, actually. And we, in the academic world, the keyword is post-feminism, right? And so this older discussion and criticism of the male gaze is now also more open to the question, is not also the female gaze something that constructs, for instance, male identity? So in that sense, the theory itself is also much more diverse than in the first phase of feminism. And I think we can also, I think there's also a danger to over-theorize works of art. I see these works more in do they have a position in the flood of images and photographs that we live with every day? And I think, yes, it's a position. And that's the extreme challenge of every artist today and photographer. I think it's a totally new world, right? In comparison to Stieglitz and also in comparison to the 1960s and 70s. So, yes, that's why I think it's so thought-provoking to see these works and also their diversity, despite their also classical, traditional basis, so to say.
That's it's one thing that always struck me in your work is the way you are not really, for me, referring to art history of the photography or the history of photography, but the way this is really assimilated in your work. And we can see in the works in the gallery here echoes, maybe, of different works. And I'd like to hear a little bit more from you about how you deal with this knowledge that you have, this visual culture, which you are also taking into account when you think of the viewer and what they know, what their cultural background is, and how it will impact the way they read the photograph. How do you deal with all these moving parts in your own work?
I think a lot of it sounds maybe a little simple, is very often not very conscious at the moment when I do my works. As I said, I think I have a really big background in the history of photography. I've seen a lot of things. I do love photography, not just my own, but I really love good photographic works, and I love to look at them, and I love to read about it. So I do have this really huge pool of references and images and memories, and usually I just like one inspiration leads me to something, and then while working I start to think about what is happening with the image. What is the image? What does it show? What does it show me? What could it show to others? And then sometimes it really changes again, because then the concepts start to hit in, and then I sometimes have to, just because of the concept, I really have to change things again. And then and sometimes it's an image, and the what it means to me, what it can mean to others, only kicks in weeks or months after, when the work is finished.
Mm-hmm. It's also a relatively lengthy process.
It is, yeah.
May I ask a question?
Oh, of course.
Yes. So you said that so photography has always been with you, and you wrote your final paper at the University of Zurich about photography in 1996, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are your favorite photographers, if that's possible to say, and has that changed over time? Or are there some references that you would say that they stick?
I mean, yes, I do have my darlings, and and I think some come to me and some leave again, but I have like these hardcore artists who I really, really love and cherish.
So can we have names?
So
well, it's like definitely Nan Goldin, it's Francesca Woodman, it's Gillian Waring, who is a contemporary artist as well, it's Claude Cahun, who is has died, I don't know, I think in the 50s or the 60s. Cindy Sherman, I guess from the very beginning, especially this work, like the film stills. Sophie Gall, the humor especially in Sophie Gall's work. I loved, there's this self-portrait of Catherine Aupier, which it really touches my heart, I guess, which I really love. And then there are men too.
Yes, because for now we could say, I mean, all these women artists are very much into feminism, into the whole feminist discourse of their own time.
Yes, they are. Yes, definitely. And that's definitely one aspect that really draws me to the work, but it's just the work as well. I really think they all did great work. They did, yeah. I'm great. I would have loved to do myself. And but at the very beginning, it was like Robert Frank. Like when I was 16 or 18, I know Elysée was showing Werner Bischof, Walter Bischof, Werner Bischof. And I think it was the first time that I actually went alone to Lausanne to see the show. And all the war photographers left a deep impact on me. Yeah. And at the beginning, I actually have to say I wanted to become a war photographer. I wanted to go out into the world, make pictures, come back and change the world.
And did you feel, I don't know any kind of photojournalism work from you?
Well, actually I did. Not very much, but I did. I went to India a couple of times and worked there with Terre des Hommes. But the experience with the people I photographed was really, really wonderful, but everything around it, the way I was treated from, with Terre des Hommes, this just didn't work out. So I realized it's not the kind of work I can do. I have to shift my focus. I mean, this wasn't really done in my head, it was as well intuitively. I realized I can't do that anymore. Yes. And then slowly, I did a lot of portraits. I think I kind of entered the fine art world, yeah, where I'm quite comfortable.
And the series is entitled A Gaze of One's Own. And there is also this idea throughout, which is also a bit the title of this discussion, but this idea of reclaiming the gaze. And yeah, that's something I'd like to hear more a little bit about, also this idea of a space of one's own, a gaze of one's own, reclaiming, and how does that work for you?
Well, it's the title is a direct reference to Virginia Woolf's Room of One's Own, which in which Virginia Woolf asks for that as well women have a space, a room, but a space of them own, so they can work and they can work on their visions, on their art. She talked about people who wrote, women who wrote. And for me, it's as well like I'm in my studio taking my own gaze and trying to claim my own gaze and questioning as well like the male gaze, but as well being aware that, as you said, we just can't switch it and have a female gaze. That would be the same thing doing all over. So we have, or I have to open up. I have to kind of like trying to find or to break down my stereotype gaze I have, because my gaze have been molded by by the male gaze in the end. And so I don't even know if I have my own gaze, because all the images I've seen in my life have kind of like sculptured my own gaze. So this work is very much about finding my own gaze, even if I don't know if that's actually possible. If I will recognize if this is my own gaze or not. And I also think we have to kind of like not talk about the female gaze, but we have to ask ourselves who is doing the looking, why are we doing the looking, how is it done, and maybe most importantly, what impact it has on the people in the photographed people. And so I kind of think we really have to deconstruct the gaze, or trying to do it, well, while doing it, progressing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, for all of us here, possibly astonishing that you bring up Virginia Woolf, right? Because we possibly could think, well, her struggle to make her claim for a space, her space, is something that is not our contemporary problem, but still it is, right? And it's not only about the gaze, but Woolf was struggling to find a space for her creativity, because in her time, and I think also maybe today for female writers, artists, it's still a problem that creativity is often seen as a male talent, right? And that is directly connected to this cliche of the genius, yeah. And there's one feminist writer that while I was thinking about your work, I remembered this book by Julia Kristeva, The Female Genius. And this title in itself is a contradiction, because it's the whole construction of the genius is male since antiquity. And but her approach is to say, well, the genius in the modern and contemporary time can be the promise of originality, can show the avenue to creativity, and that is also possible for women. And I found one sentence in her general introduction very, very intriguing, because she writes, I have to translate that in English, the work of the genius allows the flowering of the subject. So again, we have the subject, the subjectivity, and her claim is to say it's the genius can be something against standards, against stereotypes, and that's why also women writers and women artists can be seen through this formula of genius. And I mean, she writes about Hannah Arendt, Melanie Klein, and Colette, but still, I think it's this trilogy of Kristeva is still very tells us something today. And it's not the transposing the male cliche topos to the female side. It's like taking a traditional topos or something that is simply in our world of thinking and collective memory, and trying to make something new, breaking up a stereotype and bringing in creativity. And I think that's a little bit in the direction of what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm always very conflicted with this idea of the genius. It's also the way we tell history. It can be the history of science, can be history of art, any type of history that is usually presented as a long string of remarkable individuals who were trailblazers, and which in a way isn't completely wrong, but also people things exist within a context that allow them to do their work and propose it to the world. And on the other hand, this is something probably a dynamic I find in your work, because there is all of that. There is all of this history that is influencing your work. but at the same time, what I like in this idea of a room, of a gaze of one's own, is this idea of the possibility of autonomy, of something autonomous, something that can be developed, that maybe requires at some point a form of isolation, like you're doing in your studio, working only with your own body, your camera, in a way that's very independent from anything outside of the studio.
Yes, I really work in my bubble. I have a couple of people, 1, 2, 3 friends. I show the work and I discuss the work. And otherwise, I'm in my studio or in my apartment sometimes. And it just reminds me because after the opening, people came up to me and kind of said, well, it's so brave that you show these images. And I never really thought of me being brave showing these images because that's as well me in my bubble. It's not, I mean, I do think how people react to the images, but not like because they're boobs. It's just something I'm interested in, how they discuss the work or how they take the work, but not that I show naked women and that it could be scandalous or like brave. And I think this has to be as well. This is the way, because I'm really in my bubble and I don't think about that too much. Mm-hmm. And so and I'm very very happy that it is like this, because I think it would kind of like be difficult to keep the work doing, and I would think about what people might say in that respect.
It's interesting that you say you're in a bubble, that you really need this autonomous room, and what comes to my mind is that the photographer, Japanese-American photographer Sugimoto said at some point in an interview, I live on the airplane, I'm not in the studio, I'm not in any specific country, I'm always on the move, and for you it's the complete opposite, right? Mm-hmm. And however, you said you played with the idea of becoming a war photographer. So traveling is also, is that something that is traveling important for your work, or is it really that you have your own universe and that's it?
No, I think I can take my universe wherever I go. Mm-hmm. So and I do like, or I used to like to travel a lot, but it changed a little. I don't know if it's a thing that has to do with the age, and I have a kid. And the kid, he wants to stay where his friends are, so we stay with him where his friends are. But for me, it's always very important to get out of Switzerland, because I think it's a great place, it's a beautiful place, we are extremely privileged. And sometimes I kind of like need to go outside to see that we are really privileged, to see my life from the outside, my work from the outside. And I've traveled a lot, but nowadays when I travel, when I say I travel, I usually go to a place and stay there. If I've had some residencies where I could live for 6 months in Berlin or in New York or in Cairo, and these times are very, very important to me, because again, I'm on my own, or almost on my own. I'm in an environment, nobody knows me, and this is a kind of bubble I really like. I like, as I said before when we were talking before the talk, I love big cities. And I think it's because I love the anonymity. I'm in my bubble, nobody knows me. I can walk wherever I go, nobody knows me. Not that I'm famous or anything, it's just like, I'm there and nobody knows me. I can, be there, and that's for me, and I don't know, freedom is a difficult word, but it's for me, I feel very free and I can concentrate on what's most important for me.
Maybe that's the absence of the gaze then in this big
Maybe.
city, and you're walking, and we imagine that you're not aware of any gaze, and that's why you feel free.
Yeah,
even though the gaze
yeah.
is there, but you can kind of free yourself from this, from your own expectations.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to re-look everything, because everything, even, I mean, Berlin and New York, it's not so different to here, but still it's very different. And I have to kind of find out small details about daily life. Mm-hmm. And I have to watch and rewatch people doing things so I can kind of fit in.
Yeah, I think it makes sense with this dynamic, but your work being very much self-contained. I mean, you show it to a few people while you are doing it, but it's mostly self-contained things. So I guess you have to feel it from time to time from a different experience, something from the outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely think so. And that has been, in the last year very difficult. And as I said with the kid, we used to go abroad until he was, just before he had to go to kindergarten. And now we're here and, wait a little bit and then we can go again. Yeah.
And there's one aspect I'd like to discuss also, because we've spoke a lot of the process of making the images, but we are now here in the gallery with people around, and can you also explain a little bit what it means for you to exhibit the work? What you are expecting maybe in terms of the audience, besides people telling you that you are brave?
For me, it's important that people actually can think whatever they think. I don't show my images. I mean, they do have messages, my messages, but they can have other messages too. So I'm very happy when they speak to people. That people can have associations, that they hint to stories that kind of like lay hidden in the viewers. I think that's very important for me. And then, interestingly, not so much with the flowers, but with the nudes. Just to see them on barita paper, they really, really look different than in my... I mean, I mostly just look at my works on laser copies, because it's easy available, and I can throw them. I can work with them. I can pin them everywhere, and to see the quality of the photographic paper. Or my images in the photographic paper was a huge, was just very, very beautiful and nice, because especially with the nudes, I think the photographic paper brings kind of like another aspect to the images.
Maybe I could bring in some more associations from my side. Now that I'm surrounded by your works for a while, it's such a difference between the more classical black and white nudes and the powerful and at the same time fragile, colorful flowers. Is this a deliberate choice, I guess? It results in the impression that the nudes are very classical, right? And the flowers are more contemporaries in a way, if I may say that. So how do you work with color on the one hand and black and white on the other hand?
Actually, it seems here like that, but I have a lot of this series, or like this body of work, that's actually in color. But the space is limited here, so in the end we opted for these images, and for just there's one colorful, like one work in color on the stand here, and the sculptural work, just to I think just to fit everything together. I think if I had more color works here of a gaze of my own, I think it would be too much. Yes, we were thinking about it, but I think that's somehow a lot. I mean, it's a lot, but it's very empty here as well. I think it's a very an airy exhibition, which I really like, and still I think there's enough. Yeah. But it's true that the flowers are in colors, and here I do both.
And could you talk a little bit about the process, the technical process here? Because I can imagine that not everybody knows about it.
Well, I collect flowers wherever I go, like on my way to my studio, for instance, and then some of the flowers stay dry, some of the flowers I use right away, and some of the flowers I freeze. I think that's and then I have old slides, and the slides are in between glass plates. So I mean, it's not the slide, but I talk about the glass slide when I talk about these images. I use those old glass slides without the slide and put the flowers on top of it, and then I kind of like put them into water, and sometimes there's a little salt in the water too, and then they dry. And then I make a picture of this slide, and you see the border of the slide is you see it very well, and some of them they're very especially like the one here, the poppy. That's a small format slide. It's only that big, and that's something that interests me a lot. Like the bigger they get, the more you see the just really gorgeous details.
The structures and the surfaces.
Exactly.
And that process of preservation but transformational, so that's something that you designed yourself, and something you arrived to by trial and error, or did you really start out with something precise in mind?
No, I actually started a couple of years before. I did it with insects mostly, and then I started with dandelion. I can't remember how you say in English. Yeah, and it just turned out really beautiful. And so I started to test and to do these flowers. And it's for me as well a little bit like it's about the transience, like the nudist, because I'm not 20 anymore. My body is changing. You don't see it in the images as much as I thought you would. So it's a project that will go on. That's the really nice. That's the nice thing about it. I hopefully have some more years that I age and I can, take picture of myself. But now I think I lost.
No, that's
okay.
That's perfect.
The aging as a subject is very important. It's also about time and making time visible, and at the same time, I think especially the flower pictures, with the flower pictures, you're trying to say, well, it's an enormous beauty in this aging and fading, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And that has been my topic for the last, I don't know how many years. Just like this passion for wilted things growing old. And I guess it was kind of like logical that I, like together with the topic of the gaze, that I landed here with myself, my own body. The when I do like this, it's different than when it was like when I was 20 years old. And I remember when I was a kid and I was playing with my grandmother, I loved to do this. She was maybe, 70 years old. And I loved the texture of the skin. It was amazing. And so that's what I'm trying to do here a little bit as well, to show the beauty. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's, again, for me as an art historian, fascinating that on the one hand it's a very subjective experience and theme for you, aging. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, in the genre of the still life, we have this theme already since the 17th century. And what is fascinating about it is that these genres and themes can be renewed all the time, from century to century, and it's convincing. That's so nice about it.
I was actually about to ask you, because you spoke at the beginning about the risk of the over-theorization of images and I guess of them losing a little bit their autonomy. And so you still think that new images can be produced and be a little bit autonomous from all this theory and this immense visual culture that we have?
Yes, I'm absolutely convinced that older themes or formulas can be transformed, and in this transformative process we have the tradition and the history and the contemporary view. That could also be a conceptual one or a subjective one, whatever. And I think to understand that is also to see the work of art very closely. And my experience is that with contemporary art we often talk on a theoretical level, meta level, and somehow lose the connection to the single work of art or to the series, whatever we see. And that's my concern, actually. That's why I said over-theorization. Mm-hmm. Over-theorization can also result in making us blind for the individual work of art. And over the last days I thought, so why is that so? That contemporary art is so bound to theorization. And I come up with a funny idea that it's about anxiety. You over-theorize contemporary art because artists, gallerists, curators, and possibly also art historians in this field are kind of anxious that this work of art or this body of work is not substantial enough to end up in the museum. And the museum is still the space and place for eternity, right? So we push and put into these contemporary works of art so much contents in terms of theory to bring them. I mean, it's reasonable and I understand it, but my own personal approach is more to work and to work and to work with the work of art and to look at it and to take the opportunity to walk around in this gallery and take your time and let the work of art speak to oneself. And so that's my new thesis. Over-theorization is the result of anxiety.
Mm-hmm. I find it really interesting and quite relevant. I think there is also possibly also this weight of all this history, and we kind of have to prove that yes. We know about it. Of course, we know all these 500 references that might be tied to that work.
And legitimization, right? But the legitimacy of the artist is the creativity and the creative flow. That's what Kristeva says, right? It's the possibility to allow yourself the creativity. And I think a lot of people in our society and communities, I mean, they go to work, they have their families, they have not the space, often not the inner space to allow themselves this creativity, and that makes the artists so important for our society, because they stand there, sit here, and are representative of this creativity that most of us can't handle and can't let loose.
And that brings us also to the evolution of your work. I think in the first image that you showed, we had this very assigned role as a viewer. We were here, we were in that function that we may or may not have chosen. And here, I think it's very different here. For me, these images have something extremely inviting. I don't feel like a voyeur when I am looking at a naked female body. I feel very invited to look at it, to take my time, to figure out how I feel looking at it. And for me, that's one of the strongest quality of that work, really.
Immersion comes up as a word. Invited, it's immersive, and certainly I absolutely agree. I don't feel like a voyeur in front of these pictures.
Yeah, I think it. My aim is as well, like to really make it about the body, not just about the gaze, but about the body, and that it's just the body, the little details of the body that you can look at. And I think in that way you kind of like can lift the male gaze as well. It's not eroticized. It could be eroticized, but you have all these details. You can really look at the body. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, and also building a little bit of what you just said about the creativity and the uniqueness, of the work. If you were to describe, for instance, to me the image that is looking at the street, it would feel like something possibly violent, certainly very much erotic. But when you are looking at it, it's not that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also for me where also the pleasure of looking at it can come.
Mm-hmm.
And this, if you take it on the one hand, there are all of these echoes from art history. You have a naked body, all these things, but together suddenly they don't make what you would expect from it.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's the female body in art history, the flower in art history. I mean, you are tackling some very some themes and motifs that have very, very heavy history.
Yeah.
I think and going back also to this idea of the autonomy, of reclaiming the gaze, being in your bubble, I think they do have a real autonomy in that sense. Mm. And I think that they could be very evocative even for someone with a very, very different visual culture, who wouldn't be able to over-theorize them, but...
Mm.
It's remarkable that we talk so much about male and female gaze, and in a time when the paradigm is gender, right? And the overcoming of the biological gender, and that was, it's a now really old theory of Julius Butler in the 1990s, and we are still working on it. And I'm wondering whether at some point in the history of art and photography we will overcome these categories. The moment when it's not important anymore to speak about female or male or even gender.
I'm looking forward to that moment.
Forward to it.
And it's true, I think it's, in a way I think your work might also be said to be more about deconstructing the gaze within this society and not necessarily only on that gender perspective.
I think it's what you said. I think it needs more generation who actually really grow up with the feeling that I can define myself, and that there is female, male, and a lot in between and around the edges. But for me, I define myself as female, but I remember when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a boy, but I never wanted to be a boy in a boy's body. I just wanted to do what boys do. And so for me it's the same a little bit now, and that's maybe because that I still use these terms, that I'm define myself as a woman, but there's a lot still out there that I define they're still male, or they're not so accessible for women still, and I think that's what I would like, where I would like to go sometimes, and that's maybe that I myself still am like personally within these two how you say Begriffe, but
notions.
Yeah, but I really, really strongly, and I think as well with my work, I really think it's just the gaze, and you have to look at the gaze itself, and not if it's female or male. You have to see where it's coming from, how it's made, where it's going to. That's the questions we have to ask ourselves and leave the gender behind us. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think any person with any identity could be doing something similar, because the male body, the male identity is also just equally socially constructed.
Exactly.
So I think anyone who doesn't identify with that binary also.
And maybe we still don't have a terminology we can use, and so you're still stuck with the old two words and saying and the in-betweens. But I think that's kind of like work for the generations to come, who kind of live this, or hopefully have the opportunity to live this. Yeah.
It's a good
ending of the
result
discussion.
for thinking about the future.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah.
I don't know if you have questions, remarks.
I was asked last year to write a piece on blind photographers. It took me 6-8 months to reduce everything to 1,000 words, which the magazine had. But the gaze of blind photographers are extremely interesting. So, stupid question at you. If you turn blind today afternoon, would your gaze change?
Well, I actually don't know. Well, it's kind of funny because I sometimes ask myself this question. Because, I don't know if it's so obvious here, but death, for instance, that's a big theme for me. And as well, like that's something, that you fall ill, or, like all the films I saw, where terrible things happen. And so sometimes I really ask myself, what do I do when I turn blind? And and then you have these scenes, you're working with a camera, how do you deal with the outside? And you make a picture and you can't see it. How does that feel? And I really don't know. But it's a
feeling.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, thank you for the anxiety thing. It's
I think it's really spot on. Okay. We need to have a second lecture soon on.
So it will stick.
With you and Christian Ross, who wrote about contemporary art and depression.
Very, very.
Collecting ideas for the next
for the next gallery talk.
Where will it be written? Or can we read the?
It was published in the May issue of a photo magazine. I can send you a copy of a PDF. And it's about the Berlin show, but there is one thing I can suggest is the movie from Frank Ammann. That's the director, and it's now freely available. Now I forgot the title of it. Dark Side, I think. There's a thriller from the 60s that also has a similar name, but you have to turn Frank Amman and something like that. In the article it's anyway mentioned.
Okay,
I suggest that, and it became part of the teaching program because it really explains. We all think we create pictures with the eyes, and that's absolutely not true. The eyes are only here to focus, and the brain makes the picture.
Exactly.
And the brain is the stupid things into the pictures that have never been there. It's a brilliant thing.
But maybe not only the brain, but the inner world, right? And your question brings up the topic. So, what is photography? What does it? A photograph of the outer or the inner world? And it's more about the inner world, I think, and perception. I also thought when this the subject for this gallery talk came up, I thought it could have been also, instead of gaze, perception, because perception it's a broader concept, and I think that's also a suggestion for the next gallery.
So come back tomorrow. We have new ideas. Well, it's just a quick question, but these photographers, among them, were there mostly people who have lost eyesight or people who are born blind?
That was also a question, and in an online talk we had, I really asked the question the photographers, and they only knew about one person who was blind from the beginning and did the pictures. You have to have a visual memory, otherwise you cannot see.
Yeah, have visual presentations.
And all they turned by illness, some at an early age, or there is one very so short-sighted that he snaps his children, and then he takes the camera about 5 centimeters up front the eye, he has about thick glasses, and looks at the picture so he can see his kids. He only can feel his kids or see it through the camera. It's quite helpful, it's like a wheelchair to see, and he dives and he does underwater shots, and so it's
amazing.
There's also female photographers, there are quite a lot of female photographers, and there's a studio for blind photographers in Berlin who have assistants that can see and assist and do a lot of light paintings.
And it's interesting, it's also goes back to this idea also of the photography as a tool to see, because when you do your pictures, you are also you don't. I mean, of course, you know what you are doing, but there is still an element of surprise, things that work out, things that don't. And in that way, it's not just a pure recording. It's also really a tool of practice.
Yeah, I just wanted to come up with that. I don't see what I do when I do it. I only see it when the films are developed. Exactly, because I point the camera, an analog camera, towards me, and then I don't see. I only see later.
And this is a part of the process that you enjoy, or that you have to deal with, or?
No, I think it's. I enjoy it very much, and I think it. I mean, it's not all like this, but I make images as well with the handy. But no, I think it's a slow process, and I really have to focus to kind of get it right, because I can't just do 100 pictures and look or have the computer right in front of me and see if it's the way I want it. I don't know, it's just another working process. I think it involves more of myself, more of I really have to feel kind of my body, what I'm doing with it, and where the camera stands. So I think I have another conversation with the camera than when I would have the computer right, when I would do it digitally. Yeah. And I do enjoy it,
The film is called Shot in the Dark, and the website is shotinthedark.de. over-theorization.com.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. I find very interesting the fact that you say that you can't objectify yourself, but the process you explained that you don't see while photographing yourself, is it necessary exactly for eliminating this objectifying notion of photography, or do you see your photographs as a chance to merge the object and the subject, or do you see it as eliminating the object completely?
Oh, that's a really good question.
It's a difficult question. I think I kind of like even eliminate the camera woman, but still, I mean, I'm still taking the picture, even if I don't see. I mean, I'm still the author of the picture, but also the model.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't eliminate it really, I think.
Your body is still the tool.
Yes, yeah, it is the tool, but I'm also the author. So, and I don't think it merges. But that's now just like my feeling.
Yeah.
I would have to think about it a little bit more, actually. But yeah.
Because I imagine it to be very complex to completely separate those two things, because
Conceptually.
yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
But that makes it very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, I think we can conclude.
That was a very interesting question at the end. That sums up a bit everything, the whole artist talk. Thank you very much. That was very interesting, and we have a few drinks served. You all are very welcome to join us for white wine or water. Thank you very much again.
Thank you
It was
very
very,
much.
Thank you so much.
very wonderful.